Hey there YouTube, I'm Joe and you're watching my channel Ink&Iron, and today I have a review for you of the CRKT knives Cottidae. So this knife is manufactured in China, more specifically Taiwan, and is made for CRKT. That's an American knife company based out of Oregon, if I remember correctly. This particular model is the 6321, also known as the Cottidae. That is a name of a family of fish species, actually, mostly in the Pacific Ocean. Kind of big-headed, weird-looking fish. If you look them up, you'll see what I'm talking about. But let's get straight into the specifications of this knife. And I'd really like to tell you about my experience carrying it the last 2 days, because I got it a few days ago and it hasn't left my pocket. You can get it for $89.99 as of right now, which is January of 2021. The blade length on this guy, so measuring from the handle to the tip of the blade, is going to be 70.4 millimeters or 2.77 inches. I like to add an additional measurement to this in case you guys run into, let's call them annoying police officers who will look at this little tab on the blade and go, oh yeah, that is definitely a part of the blade, because if you disengage it, it moves with the blade. So if you have such a police officer measuring your knife, what you're going to get is 86.9 millimeters or 3.42 inches. So if 3 inches is your limit, this knife kind of rides the line. It's really going to depend on whether or not the police officer likes you particularly. So good luck to you out there. The blade width on this guy, measured about right here, is 22.9 millimeters or 0.9 inches, just under an inch wide. The steel here is D2, which I don't think the blade actually says it, but on CRKT's website it does. The stock thickness, measured right here, right on this flat portion of the blade, is 3.4 millimeters or 0.135 inches. That's a fairly standard blade stock. You're going to find that similar specification on something like a Spyderco Paramilitary 2. The grind on this guy is a full flat grind, or at least what I'm calling a full flat grind. This little unsharpened portion kind of resembles a Scandinavian grind, but I'm going to call it, for practical purposes, full flat grind. The behind the edge thickness, which I measure just behind the edge bevel here, so literally pinching the blade right behind the edge grind, the behind the edge thickness is 0.71 millimeters or 0.028 inches. That's 28 thousandths of an inch. That is a fairly typical behind the edge thickness, very comparable to Paramilitary 2, maybe a little thicker. The handle material here is actually, I think it's coated, but it is aluminum, and CRKT calls this ADC12 aluminum. I don't know much about aluminum grades, but there you go if you need it. The handle thickness, measured thusly, is 13 millimeters or 0.51 inches, just a hair over half an inch. The handle length, which I measure like this, is 96 millimeters or 3.8 inches. The lock on this guy is a liner lock. It looks a bit thin, but I haven't had any problems in my literally constant use of this knife over the past 2 days. The opening is technically a flipper mechanism, although this flipper tab is quite small. It does have a little bit of jimping. It's honestly all you need to get this blade open. The weight of this guy is 93.8 grams or 3.3 ounces. A little bit chunky for its size, but we'll talk more about that later. The maximum in-pocket width, measured right about here on the flipper tab, is 26.3 millimeters or 1.04 inches, just over an inch wide. Very compact carry if you're asking me. Number of clip positions, we do have 2 possible clip positions. Both of them are tip up, so it's currently right here, and it has one on the other side as well for lefties. Is this knife ambidextrous? I'm going to say yes, and that is being said as a right-handed individual. However, the flipper mechanism and the lock are easy enough to actuate that I don't think a lefty is going to have much issue here. The pivot on this guy is actually on bearings, and I don't know if you can see them right now, but we will definitely take a look at those later. Creates a very, very smooth opening and closing action on this guy. Now that we've got all the specifications, let's talk a little bit more about what you might use this knife for. So this was designed by Jesper Voxnes. You may have heard the name before. Jesper, I believe in my last video I said I think he's from the Netherlands. He is actually from Denmark and designed this knife in Denmark as well. Specifically, he designed it to be used in a mechanic shop, which I found interesting. The intended use case for this is going to be in a highly oily shop environment. So you might find things like machine oil, pump oil, very low viscosity oils that are going to kind of get all up in your gear that you're using, as well as things like dust, debris, and especially like metal filings. So this knife needs to be very easy to clean out and maintain. And as you can see from this very obvious little tab here, this has a special mechanism that lets you maintain this knife much easier. This features the Generation 2 field strip technology. So the field strip technology was developed by Ink&Iron for CRKT, and honestly they have outdone themselves with the Generation 2. Let's get right into that. The philosophy of use for me on this guy is definitely a mechanic's knife to be used in a shop. I work in a laboratory, so this actually works fantastic for me. And yeah, the philosophy of use is going to be an everyday carry because this disassembles with no tools. Yeah, you saw me do that in real time. I would recommend using two hands. I have tried to do this one-handed, but two hands is the safer way to do this. So let's take a little look at this blade here. It is riding on bearings in a apparently brass housing, and somehow they are affixed to the blade. I haven't figured out quite how they did that. Like maybe this little bushing here is keeping them in place, but you can see the brass and the bearings actually rotate. So I'm not totally sure how they did this wizardry, but man, do I appreciate it, because now I can lube up my knife no problem. Again, alluding to being used in a mechanic shop, you can blow this out with compressed air if you need to. You could take a little pump oil and just put it straight on your bearings and, you know, get on with the rest of your day. This knife is super, super easy to maintain, and I actually brought it to the lab already because of how easy it was. Let me reassemble this for you guys real quick, and here's a quick tip on this Gen 2 field strip. I would put these knives in a locked position so you can see the lock actually engaging there. What this will do is keep this blade clear of this little cutout right here. This cutout and this cutout on these pins are what actually engage the mechanism. So let's see, this is disengaged, right? This is lock engaged. Do you see the little horseshoe shaped pieces of metal in here? If you don't, let me demonstrate for you. So I'm going to move the tab over and disengage it. Moving it over, disengaging it. Kind of hard to do around the camera, but there you go. Did you see it move? See that? Comes down and clamps onto these pins. So what you need to reassemble is have it disengaged, have the knife clear of this little mushroom shaped pin, and make sure that they go on there, right? Just kind of hold them with hand pressure and then flip that back into place. And now your knife is perfectly centered, perfectly reassembled, and good to go. So I am very enthusiastic about this technology. I cannot wait for more designs like this. But let's focus a little more on the Cottidae itself. So the blade on this guy is small, controllable, with lots and lots of belly. As you can see, there's this giant finger choil cutout. I believe your hand is intended to ride in that at all times. You're not really meant to choke back on this knife. I definitely lose a finger on there with my medium-sized hands, so for bigger hands or for people looking for more reach, this probably isn't the knife for you. That being said, the D2 blade makes this super easy to sharpen, and I have done so. So let me, I have resharpened it. I mean, the factory edge was shaving. It was an uncomfortable shave, but I have a very nice comfortable shave on there right now. And yeah, you can see it takes the hairs right off. So yeah, no problem on this D2 blade. It may be susceptible to rust, but CRKT recommends keeping a coating of oil on your blade, and I would probably do that for D2 as well. Let me do a quick cutting demo for you because I need it to tell you a little more about this blade. So another reason I think you need to have a finger in here is when you go to cut, if you happen to land in this finger choil, you're just going to skate off your material. What you need is your finger there to index where the blade is so you can land your cut precisely. Like I said, I have sharpened this, so this blade is performing a little bit better than it was from the factory. Very clean cutter. This D2 takes a very keen edge, and let's get a little bit of cardboard in here as well. Here's some fairly standard looking cardboard, single wall. Again, you don't want to be up here with it. You want to try and choke up on this blade as much as possible. But then when you do, it's a pretty solid slicer. Your real working portion of this blade is going to be the tip. As you can see, there is a distal taper here, and then also that V grind on the full flat. So really your tip is going to be your money maker here. If you've got to cut rubber hosing or sheet material or anything like that, this is going to do the most work for you. That being said, the rest of the blade does perform rather well. Feels very similar to a Spyderco knife that we'll actually talk about in a minute. Okay, moving on to the handle. So this is a very textured aluminum, as I think you can tell by my lighting here. Quite rugged. You can see it actually abrades my fingernails. Yeah, it provides a very solid grip on a very small blade with a very large handle area or grip area, and this offers you a lot of control. I gotta say, I'm a fan of that. One caveat is going to be what you're wearing when you clip this knife in your pocket. I would recommend sort of shop clothing. Put this in an apron, put this in your cotton duck pants, at least put it in some denim. I would not put slacks through here because it is quite a serious grip given this handle texture. I have used this with nitrile and rubber gloves as well, and it works well for that also. The aluminum handle also lends it its sort of heavy weight for being a smaller knife, which I don't find unappealing. I think it's okay weight-wise at 3.3 ounces to be this size of a knife. It doesn't bother me. The clip on this guy is everything it needs to be and nothing it doesn't. One advantage of this clip, there is only one clip screw, as you can see on this side, and that is because the handle is aluminum. So because it nests into this cutout, you only need one screw to keep it in place, and the rocking back and forth in this dimension is handled by the aluminum, stopping it from moving. So yeah, I gotta say I like it. It's pretty deep carry. Only a little fraction of this knife sticks out of the pocket, and let me cut to a shot of that right now. Now that you've seen it in pocket, I think you can see what I'm saying about how tightly it grips and how it's everything it needs to be and nothing it doesn't. And I gotta say, I'm a fan of not seeing a bunch of billboarding here. Looking at you, Zero Tolerance and SOG. Maybe just go with a normal clip once in a while. Anyway, rant over. Size and weight considerations for this knife. It's kind of heavy for its overall size, but again, I enjoy how it carries, so I can't fault it too much for that. This is going to be legal in many US cities, but will depend again on how the cops in your local area are going to measure the blade. If they measure here up, you're going to be under 3 inches in most jurisdictions. If they measure from flipper tab up, yeah, you're going to want a 3.5 inch limit on your legally carried concealed weapons. This small cutting edge portion may not be for everyone. As I said, you kind of need to choke up on it in order to index it properly and not have your material that you're cutting fall into the choil. That being said, such a small blade with so much belly is very nice for carving through material, paper, cardboard. I used this to ream some PVC already at work, and it was fantastic for that. It also shaves plastic, nips threads just fine, so I like it as a general purpose utility blade style. It almost looks like a giant scalpel. There are no color options for this knife yet. What you see is what you get. It is a black textured handle, silver blade, pretty basic knife package that you're used to seeing from basically every manufacturer right now. The finishing on this guy is excellent, and I say that especially because it comes in at under $100. This is really nice. It's minimal, but they paid attention to certain details, like the blacked out hardware makes this a much quieter knife to pull out in mixed company. As I said, I work at a lab, so you have like salespeople and also manufacturing people, and you never know who you're going to bump into. This hasn't drawn much attention at all, so I gotta say I appreciate the low-key aspect of this design so far. This knife could easily have had some sort of rough finishing on the inside, but CRKT seems to have gone out of their way to make sure that that didn't happen. I don't think these liners may be stonewashed. They do have a little bit of a nicked up sort of texture to them. Not totally sure what's going on there, but it is like glass smooth on the inside, which is something I do appreciate because you're going to be in here a lot, working with your knife, maintaining it. Nothing's poking out at you, nothing's sharp, nothing is unfriendly to the hand. So I gotta say that is a very nice, considerate thing that CRKT has done in regards to keeping this a user-friendly design. The silhouette on this guy is fairly minimal. I do like the little back end here, pretty minimal. No lanyard hole. I don't know any mechanics or manufacturing people that use anything on a lanyard, to be honest with you, so I appreciate that aspect of it. There's sort of some industrial elements here with these cutouts, and then the rest of it is fairly minimal. Simple drop point, very nice long line on the spine here, gentle curve to it. Yeah, very distinctive without being loud, if that makes sense. The centering on this guy, as I've shown you, is perfect and stays perfect, even with you assembling and disassembling it repeatedly, maybe multiple times a day, as you've seen me already do here. The opening mechanism I thought was going to be an issue when I first got this knife, because I looked at this tiny flipper tab and went, oh no, that's going to be a difficult flipper to operate. However, it is super smooth. These bearings are very high quality, very high grade, as I can tell by the sheer amount of times I have flipped this since receiving it. The jimping does just enough to add grip and overcome the detent, and speaking of the detent, it's perfectly tuned. I don't know how they did it, but I've never had a flipper tab this small that I could push button operate rather than light switch. So what I mean here is a light switch, you kind of keep your finger in a more vertical position and almost sort of make a scratching motion to open. A push button, you kind of push down like you're pushing a button. And yeah, you can push button even this tiny little blade because these bearings are so well tuned, and so is the detent. So gotta say, really appreciate the attention to detail on that. Just to prove it to you, I did what I'm calling a reverse thumb flick. So you can flick a front flipper knife like this, and this is on the back side, so you can take your thumb and literally open it that way. It's that smooth, and it does drop shut as well once you get past the detent. Is it the most drop shutty knife? No, because it's a tiny little blade, but look at that. I hope I'm conveying how smooth this is, but I don't know. So if you're curious, try to get one of these in hand. The liner lock is a little bit of a basic aspect of the design. It's unremarkable, steel on steel liner lock with the detent ball nested in there. It's good. It makes it more easy to use with either hand. I find frame locks a little unfriendly to lefties, but liner lock seems to work just fine. Another important thing about the lock is that it is currently locking up early. And what I mean is it is more to the left side of the blade as we're looking at right now rather than the right. Over time the metal will wear and it will walk itself more over to the right side. So it is prepared for longevity in its current configuration, which is a good thing. So at its price point of basically 90 bucks, there is a good amount of competition in this area, and let me tell you about that while I do some, well, right after I do some size comparisons. First up, let's compare a knife I consider to be basically directly competitive with this design. This is the Spyderco Lil Native. This is S30V, but just look at these blade profiles and tell me you don't see sort of a resemblance here. Next up, we'll use another fairly similar blade. This is the Para 3 lightweight, and the reason I bring this out, let me show you real quick, is look at these tips of these knives. Do you see how similar those are? So if you like the Para 3's performance, this is essentially a smaller version of the same cutting performance. Because it's a classic, here's an 89mm Victorinox. This is the Victorinox Explorer knife. And another classic to compare, this is the Opinel number 8. This is one of their more popular sized Opinel knives, very traditional folding knife. Alright, lastly we have a Paramilitary 2, which as you can see dwarfs this little cot-e-day. And then the Gerber EAB, which is the knife that my cot-e-day is basically replacing in my pocket at work. By the way, the Gerber EAB uses a fairly standard utility blade, so if you know the size of that, it'll give you a better sense of how big the cot-e-day is. So the last thing I want to talk about here is the competition for this knife. At $89.99, a sub $100 price point, I think this is holding its own as a popular EDC knife for 2021. And let me explain why, because this price point is actually very populated with fantastic EDC knives. And let me just list a few of them for you here. So this knife is, I'm going to call it 90 bucks. For $100, you can get a CRKT Bonafide, and that is featuring this same Gen 2 field strip technology. So if you don't like this design, maybe check out the Bonafide for a little bit more I'd say swagger. This one's a little bit understated. That one has a little bit more flair going on. You can also get a Spyderco Delica for $94.50, and all these prices are from Blade HQ right now. The Delica is an infamous popular EDC knife and one of Spyderco's flagship designs. The Buck 110 Slim Pro is basically the same money as this knife. I think it's 5 cents cheaper. You can also get a Ferrum Forge Prolix for the same money. You can get a Civivi Elementum, and that is featuring Damascus steel and carbon fiber handles. So that's pretty competitive, although that's more on the swagger side of things, and this one's a little bit more functional. There's also the Cold Steel aluminum handled tie light in the 4-inch pattern, and that one's $88. So this knife is sitting pretty in very good, refined, everyday carry knife territory. And honestly, I think it'll hold its own. Is it for everyone? Probably not. For me, it works fantastically well, considering this is designed for mechanics, and I happen to work in a cannabis refinement lab. So I encounter oils, resins, solvents, all kinds of things that would destroy or damage lesser knives. This one is going to stand the test. And the fact that I can just disassemble it with, a movement of my thumb is fantastic. I can get in here and blow it out with compressed air. I can wash it out with isopropyl alcohol. I can maintain it on the fly and reassemble it on the fly. And I've never had a knife this easy or this conducive to just everyday maintenance of a knife. And yeah, I gotta say, I'm a big fan, and you've seen me take it apart and put it back together at least 3 times in this video. It's just that easy. So for the ease of maintenance, I did resharpen it as well. So you can see I'm starting to wear away the factory grind, although it's going to take a bit because it actually has pretty good edge retention. Cutting paper, cutting cardboard, basic stuff, this is going to have no problem. Is it for everyone? Probably not. If you've got big old, sausage fingers or whatever, you may not find enough real estate on this knife. And if that's the case, maybe check out the Bonafide. That does seem to be a little bit longer design from CRKT, but overall, I think the Cottidae is going to be one of my favorite EDC knives. I know I've used it nonstop the past like 2 or 3 days, however long I've had this. And yeah, I can't get enough. I keep flicking it and playing with it and dropping it shut. And yeah, it's just very fidgetable, very fun to use. And yeah, overall, I think for 90 bucks, this was totally worth it. And I am happy to be one of the first reviewers to bring it to you for your consideration. So thank you very much for joining me on this review of the CRKT Cottidae. I also do fountain pens and notebooks and all kinds of EDC gear. I actually have some upcoming stuff. This is a little side project I'm working on. So yeah, if you want to see more, please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you around for more. Thank you for joining me today. I've been Joe, you've been watching Ink and Iron, and I'll catch you on my next video. Bye.